Hello again everyone. So please forgive the hand cam, I don't have my camera with me at the moment, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of an update on the workshop. As you probably know, I've been sort of outgrowing the shed a little bit recently, and those who do follow my channel regularly will know that I've been hoping to move into a bigger space. So here it is. So I've been spending the last couple of days when I've had a few free hours, rather than working on a guitar, putting this workbench together. This is just the first one of about three. This one's actually intended, you'll notice it's got this cutout at the bottom here, so I can actually get a chair underneath. This one's actually more intended for me to sit and do my electronics work in guitar setups and things like that rather than doing any serious woodwork, but it's still a nice sturdy workbench with lots of storage. Gonna have another one sort of similar but a little bit skinnier along this back wall over here, which will get the pillar drill and any other bench mounted tools on. And then in the centre of the floor where all this stuff's currently piled up, I'm hoping to set up an actual bench, or maybe a bit of an island thing with the table saw and everything built into it. That'll probably evolve over time actually. We do actually have a bench top which is piled under this wood at the moment actually. So if you can see down there, there's a proper woodworking bench, although I mean it's very tatty, but I was planning on reworking the top of that and maybe making that my central sort of guitar making workbench, and then having a table saw and the router backing onto it. In fact actually I've got a little 3D mock-up which I made earlier. I'll put it on screen now. So as you can see, that's a rough idea of what it'll look like. I mean the central bit in particular will sort of evolve over time. It won't look like that right from the start. But in case you've been wondering why I haven't been posting too much guitar stuff, that's why. I've just got a bit of a drive on to get this place cleared out and get set up down here really. It will take a little while, probably a few months. You might actually start seeing me doing some of the electronic stuff from this bench before I get the guitar stuff going out of here. But yeah, so I've spent all morning doing that. I'm going to head up to the shed now and see if I can get a little bit of time in on one of the guitars. So let's get going on that. And through the magic of video editing, we're back in the shed. So what have we got in store today? First of all, let me say, if you happen to notice any strobing effects or any poor video quality in this episode, do bear with me. I'm experimenting with some different file formats and things to try and overcome that camera overheating problem. So I'm not really going to know whether that's actually caused any problems until I get the footage back in the laptop. So please just bear with me if it's not perfect this time out. So what have we got to work with today? Well, this, as you know by now, is my flame sycamore cap that I've been working on. However, what I probably haven't made too clear at this point is that it's not perfect. What I'm really hoping to do by the end of this little session is actually get this glued on to the back of the guitar. However, it's not quite ready for that yet, and here's why. So we know that this back's pretty flat. It always has been, and I even ran my plane over it just to make sure that these central blocks and everything were nice and level, and it's good to go for gluing. However, as I say, I haven't been particularly upfront with how it's gone with this cap so far, in that I did at one point try to plane the back of the cap flat when it wasn't level. And I don't know if you can see here if I zoom in, it's got lots of little pot marks where it's sort of teared out and the blade's dug in and all this kind of thing. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, my blade was fairly sharp, but I think I was going in the wrong direction against the grain and all kinds of things really. Let's just say it didn't go that well. That in itself isn't actually much of a problem. It's still got enough gluing surface down the centre there and everything that it's going to be absolutely fine. However, there is one slight problem. If I pop the cap in place, and I do like doing that because the guitar looks nice and guitar-like and close to completion when I do that, but if I spin it round to, I think it's this opposite side, and move the camera so that you can see, if I zoom right in on this little corner here, it almost looks like there's a little gap. well, there is a little gap, and that's not because the wood's not flat, but that's because when I've come towards the edge of the wood with the plane's just kind of dipped off the edge of the plane as it loses that support as it comes towards the edge, and that's created just an ever so slight bevel on that corner. Now it's tiny, it's almost unnoticeable, and to be honest with you, my plan was just to glue up anyway and then fill that in with the same old dust and glue. However, when I look at what dust and glue looks like on the inside of the guitar where I've used it here out of sight, you can see that it's quite dark compared to this wood, and if the painting goes well, I'd hope to leave that white as a kind of faux binding. So I think any kind of filler on there is really going to show up. It wouldn't be the end of the world, it wouldn't spoil the guitar entirely, but it's to be avoided if it can be. So to try and do that, here's the plan. So what we ultimately want to do is try and get the back of this as flat as possible, removing the minimal amount of material, and we really don't want to take that much off, as I say, because the edge of that binding, there's not going to be much material left to work with. I've still got to fully carve it, and it's probably going to end up only about 1/2 centimetre thick as it is. Now, if you're talking about workshop machinery, the ideal thing to sort that out would have probably been, I would say, a drum sander, a sander thicknesser. It's not the ideal shape to put through one of those, but if you could get it through flat, it would flatten it out lovely in 2 seconds flat, really. But of course, I don't have one of those. I could attack it with a plane, but we've already determined that my plane skills aren't that good at this point. So instead, we have this board, and to the other side of it, I've glued 3 strips of 60 grit sandpaper. So the plan here is to simply take the top, rub it up and down, and because this board is flat, hopefully we'll be able to sand the back of it relatively flat to the point where that gap is no longer there. I think it will probably take fairly long because we've got quite a big surface area here, but I'm just going to try and put some elbow grease into it and hopefully it should do the trick. I think we are just about there. Don't know if you can see. Zoom in there. But this edge was where all the little chips were. It's lovely and smooth now. If we go back to the centre, you can see there's still some divots there because just by the nature of the way I'm doing this, I've been putting more pressure on the outsides to try and get those smooth. But that's actually okay. Even if the centre ends up minutely higher than the outside edge, a little bit of clamping pressure will sort that right out, but what it couldn't do was sort out those little chips around the outside edge. So I'm very happy with that. Let's put it on the back and just check that it fits okay. So hopefully if I just turn that round, you can see that I'm getting a pretty good match now. The camera focuses. You can still see a minute gap like here, but just the littlest bit of clamping pressure will resolve that. So I'm not worried about that at all. So yeah, pretty good. The only thing that's been playing on my mind a little bit is that we've still got quite a lot of weight held up in these central blocks in the guitar. Quite frankly, after seeing the way that the caps come together, I think it's actually strong enough that I could go full hollow on this guitar. But to be honest with you, I really don't want to waste another weekend getting rid of those blocks when it's not entirely necessary. Yes, it does mean that the guitar is going to ultimately end up a bit heavier, but I think I'm just going to make the claim that the mass of these blocks around the bridge area is really going to help the tone of the guitar. And to be honest with you, I think it probably will. So what are we looking at here? Well, I foresaw a slight problem when it came to gluing and clamping, and that's the fact that I really want to clamp down on the edges for the most part, but the edges are at quite an angle, so the clamps aren't really going to be able to sit on there properly. Now, these kinds of clamps that I'm using do actually have a little bit of wiggle in them so that you can clamp stuff that's not quite flat, but the more you do that as well, it's just going to start pushing and moving things, and not good. So I've just reached into the scrap bin and just very roughly cut some wedges to fit around the edge there, which hopefully should provide some nice stable surfaces to clamp down on. I just need to get those stuck down with a little bit of masking tape and super glue, and then we should be more or less ready to glue. Well, hey, my genius knows no bounds. So let's get those holes drilled for the pickup wires before we forget. Now, the norm on a solid body guitar would be to go from the neck pickup cavity to the bridge pickup cavity, but because this is a hollow body, it makes much more sense to just actually go straight out the side, more or less, heading in the direction of the controls. For a bigger bit. Only just made it at an angle, it would seem. Just came out right at the bottom there. Excellent. So yeah, anyone trying to replicate this, do bear in mind I'm using a very thick body here. If I'd done that on a normal Les Paul or something, I would have come out the back. There is of course a ground wire to do as well, but I'm going to have to do that when the cap's on. There's no way I'm going to drill it in the right place and not have it full of glue, etc. Without knowing exactly where those bridge posts are. So we're just about ready to glue, I think. I just need to give it a quick clean inside because this is the last chance I'm going to get to do anything inside now. Right, so I don't think I can put this off any longer. We're just about ready to glue. I've got my 2 locator screws in that I've been using throughout, and while they don't get me bang on 100% accurate, they definitely get the cap where I intend it to be. And I'm just going round at the moment, just making sure everything is indeed ready to glue. Taking off any masking tape which I think might get in the way of the glue joint. Last thing we want is masking tape trapped in the glue joint. It's just there to protect from the super glue, really. You can see where I sanded away there, that's lovely, nicely closed up now. We've got our jack hole already drilled, we've got all our control holes ready drilled. I think we are about good to go. So a little thought about glue. I've got polyurethane glue and I've got standard wood glue. Now, to some extent I would have trusted the polyurethane glue more for this job because I really want to fight any possible chances of any delamination when I glue these two things together. And we know that the polyurethane glue is waterproof, which should stop any moisture penetration over time. All that said though, if I went with the polyurethane glue, I would get that foam coming out of the joint, and while I could happily clean that off the outside of the guitar, there's nothing I can do to clean it off the inside of the guitar, which wouldn't be the end of the world, it wouldn't be on show, but when you think what you're effectively creating there is foam, well, foam absorbs sound, and I think it would detract from the resonance of the guitar, so I really don't want to use that. So I'm kind of stuck with the standard wood glue. If I had the option available, then I would definitely use a wood glue which has some water resistance to it. I forget which of the type bonds is the correct one for that, but this one does say that it has some water resistance as well. It is actually rated for outdoor use, so it should be absolutely fine. What I am going to do, because I've drilled these holes and I don't want them full of glue, they're actually in areas that are going to be taken out with the router anyway. So I'm just actually going to clog them up or cover over them with a tiny little bit of tape just to stop the glue seeping down into those holes. I don't think the glue would actually go down that far anyway, but can't hurt just to play it safe. I don't think the glue would go down that far anyway, but it can't hurt just to play it safe. So the plan is apply glue to this surface only, make sure it's spread out with my makeshift glue spreader, and then screw the top on. That should hold it in place quite nicely while I basically go around and clamp it. Just going to move the camera back a little bit so it's not in the way when I start to clamp it. Right, well, it might look like my guitar is trapped in the Matrix or something, but it's certainly clamped up with every clamp I have. A couple of the little wedges that I'd made did fail and actually slip off just because they weren't sitting right, particularly in this corner. There's actually a really good join there, so I decided to utilise that clamp elsewhere. It's looking pretty good. I'm confident that I'm going to get a good fit. I think the only place I'm slightly worried about is this edge here. I don't know, maybe if I can zoom in there. Just adjust the brightness. There's almost, I think it's like the illusion of a gap because I've got a slight lip where the top and the bottom aren't exactly flush with each other, which is fine because I haven't sanded around it yet. That's exactly why I haven't sanded around it yet, but I'm a little bit concerned there, but I've done the best I can with what I have available, so I'm just going to have to let it dry overnight and see what we're left with, really. So there we have it. I'm excited to see what that turns out like. If you are too, you'll just have to join me next time. Goodbye.